You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 252. How to work effectively with independent contractors with Lacey Updegraff. If you're a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I am really excited to bring this episode to you because it's been a long time in the making, meaning my executive assistant, Lacey, and I have been talking about how we could collaborate to bring an episode of value to my audience. And we landed on it and we scheduled it, and that's what today's conversation is all about. So I'm really excited that you get to meet our guest and my executive assistant, Lacey Updegraff. Lacey is the owner of Lacey Co Consulting, an executive assisting and online business management company. After 16 years in the nonprofit management, Lacey decided it was time for her to take her skills and expertise and use them to create her own business. She is an online business management expert who loves to help business owners run more efficient operations and make the most of their time by creating systems, managing processes, and outsourcing the tasks that take away from their core business. She is married to her college sweetheart and lives in Alabama with their 3 active kiddos. Today's episode is Lacey and I just chatting back and forth with all things independent contractor, how to work with them, what's the difference between independent contractor and employee, how to clearly communicate, how to hire, how to work with, how to set expectations. Oh my gosh, we went into so much. Today's episode was created on the basis of this opportunity that we have as business owners to build our teams, not just virtually, but with independent contractors. And there's so much misinformation out there, blurred lines. And so Lacey and I just thought, let's have a conversation. And once you understand what it looks like, you will leave today's episode being so much clearer about if hiring an independent contractor is the path for you to fill a certain role in your business, or is it an employee? Let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to Productivity Straight Talk, Lacey. How are you?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It seems a little odd to say welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. I mean, you're here in the business all the time. But I shared in my intro that you're my executive assistant and you've been with me for quite some time.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about doing an episode together off and on for a while.
Wow.
And we landed on this topic of that I think is totally relevant and going to be so helpful to our listeners about how to work with an independent contractor. Because you are an independent contractor in my business, and
Right.
Your business is being an independent contractor for multiple businesses. And it is different than an employee. So we're just going to dive in and have a great conversation about that.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, before we do, outside of your bio, why don't you share with our audience how long have you been an independent contractor? A little bit about your story. How'd you go from employee to independent contractor? And what was the difference for you before we get into the difference of what that might be for the business owner working with an independent contractor versus employee?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated in mass communications with my bachelor's degree. So it's one of those just figure out what you want to do when you later, I guess, sort of degrees. It kind of covered a lot of things. I always thought I wanted to be in radio. That was where I really got started. And so under mass communications, where I went to school was also radio, television, and film. So thought that might be something that I do. But I also got a degree in business because I was like, well, if I have a communications degree and a business degree, then I can just figure it all out later, right? So
That sounds like a good plan.
that was my plan. And so that's when I graduated, I was still trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, but I really thought radio or television production was what I wanted to really dive into. So I started in live video production, is kind of where I got started when I graduated. My husband and I moved to Atlanta, and I was like, I'm going to break into the radio business. Well, little did I know that people in Atlanta don't care about the little girl from Alabama. They were looking for big names and people with connections and people with agents. And, that was totally far from what I was doing and who I was at the time. So I got into live video production and the back end side of things. So that's kind of where I got into the back end side of businesses, I guess, was starting with the live video production that I was doing. So fast forward, I worked in nonprofit management for 15 years. So the live video production I was doing was for nonprofit. Moved around in roles there in nonprofit, mostly landing in fundraising and managing teams. So I did that for really large nonprofit organizations. As my husband moved us around because of his job, I was able to move to different nonprofits, a lot of which most people will have heard of. They're large, kind of worldwide nonprofits. And so I would manage teams from all over the place, not just locally where I was. And I would manage large budgets, anywhere from 5 million to tens and hundreds of millions of dollars for these fundraising efforts. So that's what I did. And so I kind of got to a place in my career after 15, 16 years that it was either you're going to have to move up and start really traveling and going to these places and managing these teams in other places, or you're going to have to say, this isn't I'm done with this, because that was really the only other step for me. And I have 3 kids at home, very active, and a husband who works, and decided that was not the place for me. And, that it was time to do something else. But I learned so much by doing all of that about the back end of businesses that I thought, you know what, I can really take this and teach it and help with online businesses do the same thing. We're all doing the same thing, just in a different way. So I started really digging into online businesses and kind of the whole world of online businesses, which was a totally different world that I didn't even realize how massive it was.
Right.
And just took the skills that I had learned over the last 16 years and moved them to here. So I've been doing this for almost 4 years now, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing for me and for my family. And it was definitely the right move, even though it was really scary. So
yeah. And I mean, we're throwing out the word online business, but really that kind of has evolved into any business that's willing to hire virtually, right?
Exactly.
There are local businesses that need virtual help,
Right.
but they wouldn't be technically called an online business. So I just want to make sure, is that true for you?
Yes, absolutely. So I've definitely worked with brick and mortar businesses now. I think because I started my business in 2019, before we even knew what COVID was. And then when COVID hit, in 2019, I thought that it would only be virtual and online businesses. But 2020 kind of shifted everything. And I've had a lot of brick and mortar businesses reach out to me for help, because people are starting to realize that, they can do a lot of the same things virtually that they were doing in office. So it definitely goes for both, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful. I mean, of course, I have clients that do their business online, but a lot of my clients are local business owners wherever. And they are so much more open to thinking outside the box of what it would be like to have somebody virtual and or a contractor. And, like you just said, with this change with COVID of suddenly everybody works from home and everybody had to figure out technology and everybody had to figure out how to work remotely, even with their employees. I think that it's worthwhile that again, this is our conversation, so we're going to dive into that, is that it's not the same. So you could work virtually with an employee.
Right.
And you can work virtually with an independent contractor, or you can work locally with an independent contractor and virtually with an independent contractor, right? And so when we throw out independent contractor, it does not mean just because they're virtual, vice versa. So why don't you share with me what you see your role is as an independent contractor? And because you had 15 plus years, obviously, as an employee, What is the biggest difference for you in how you work with a business owner?
Yeah, I think it has evolved over time, kind of what that looks like. And it evolved for me as I grew my business and started to kind of realize what I wanted out of my business. So I do think this can be different for different people depending on who you're working with. But in my personal opinion, with an independent contractor, what you have to remember is they are not an employee of your business. You cannot tell them you have to be sitting because most of my clients are, I don't have one full-time client. I have multiple part-time clients. So none of my clients can say, Lacey, I need you sitting at your desk from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. because I may only work for them for an hour a day or 2 hours a day, something like that. And they can't necessarily tell me this is when you're going to be doing it. Now, some things, we have things scheduled. You and I have a weekly meeting, or I may run one of your sessions for Leverage Lab or something like that. So I know when those are. Obviously, I'm going to be sitting at my computer at that time, but those are planned. So it's not like Amber's going to come to me and say, Lacey, I need you sitting at your desk from 9 to 5 every day. That's just sort of the difference of being an employee versus an independent contractor, where employees have that set expectation of this is the hours that I work, where I may, have a kid has a doctor's appointment today, so I'm going to work on Sunday for a couple of hours, or I'm kind of tired today or not feeling great today, so I'm going to work tonight instead of working during the day. So my hours aren't as controlled by the people that I work with as they would be as an employee or an employee role. So that's kind of how I see the difference for me.
I mean, I think that's important. And actually, I just want to reference a resource. Go to Google, type in employee versus independent contractor IRS. And there's actually rules from the IRS that state whether the position is employee or independent contractor. And one of them is what you just started out with, is it fixed hours? Mm-hmm. The other one that you mentioned too is, can you, the independent contractor, be doing that same job for all other businesses, right? Yeah. So like, you can't be technically my independent contractor and work for me and only me for 40 hours, and that you don't have the capability, or I don't have a contract with you saying you can't work for any other business in this capacity. Right. That is a shift to employee. Right. And so we're going to keep diving in and talking about this, but we're going to talk about communication and expectations and all of that. But I think it's really good for you to understand the IRS standards, because you want to make sure you're compliant. But this is why also we need to talk about this, is that, you might have read that list once and then just decided like it's cheaper, it's easier to do independent contractor. And then I'm sure, Lacey, you've had this experience, is that then they are in business relationship with you as an independent contractor, but have mismanaged expectations.
Right. Yes. I've run into that several times, unfortunately. And it's, sometimes they're hard conversations. They're always hard conversations to have, but I run my own business. I am an independent contractor and I have my own business. Now, as an executive assistant or online business manager, which are kind of the two roles that I play in other people's businesses, I am very invested in your business because of the role that I play. However, there are some lines, although a bit gray sometimes, because I am personally invested in my clients' businesses. I want to see them succeed. However, I do have to remember that there is a line between being an employee of your business and owning my own business. And so, those lines are a little bit gray sometimes, because as an assistant, I'm super involved in all the nitty-gritty details of people's businesses. Now, as if you're a graphic designer or maybe even a social media manager, sometimes the lines aren't as gray. It's easier to identify the fact that like I'm outside of your business. But with those people like executive assistants and online business managers that manage team members and manage like your calendar and your email, like I'm very in the details. So those lines are a little bit grayer and a little bit harder to define sometimes. But I think just remembering, if you're going to hire an independent contractor, they are not an employee in your business. They actually do own their own business. It's just sometimes it's a little hard to remember.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's totally normal that I would Voxer you and you'd be like, yeah, I'll get to that. I am out to lunch, or I'll get that. I'm, at a doctor's appointment, or I'm with the kids, right? Like
Yeah.
You're completely transparent. There's no hiding because
Yep.
I don't care. You're just giving me a heads up of like, I'm not going to be in the office for a couple hours.
Yep.
And this is a really good conversation because I had to ask myself as a business owner, when I'm thinking I need executive assistant support, did it need to be certain hours? Did it need to be when I needed you? Or was my business set up in a way that it's okay if an email didn't get responded to for 2 or 3 hours, right? Like, is it okay that if there was a customer support issue that it didn't need to be absolutely answered within 15 minutes? Now,
Right.
if your business is that way and that you need somebody prepared to handle, or you have so much, situations, right? Like this, like,
Turnaround time. Yeah.
yeah, then you're definitely going to want to have an employee and they're going, even if they're virtual, that you're like, okay, I need you sitting at your desk between 9 and 5 other than your lunch break. But this is a great start. So do you need someone for set hours, ready to work at all times, or can they set their own schedule?
Absolutely. And I think that all goes down to, and I think we've talked about this before, but having a really well-defined scope of work before you go to hire that in that position. Because it's not that independent contractors can't be at their desks from 9 to 5. That might be what they want to do. Me personally, it's not what I want to do because it's, it's not feasible for me with 3 kids and my business. I have multiple, clients. It's not necessarily possible for me to be on call for each one of my clients. It's just not possible for me to be in 4 places at one time or anything like that. But because you had a well-defined scope of work, I know that you want, emails responded to within 24 hours. That's great. That I can do. But had it been in the job description, all emails need to be responded to within 15 minutes. That's just an expectation that I would need to know as an independent contractor up front. And to be able to, to be honest with you on whether or not that was possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we're talking about communication, and, a lot of people have asked me, friends in the business, clients have asked me, like, how does it work with Lacey and why does it work so well? Specifically, because I do talk about you quite a bit. And I think one of them is that we had very clear expectations up front. So obviously in my business, it's part of my culture. If you want to work in the middle of the night because you had a school event with your kids during the day, I'm cool with that. But I think we've had that clear communication. I'm not boxering you in the middle of the night. I'm not emailing you after hours. And I'm also very clear that you're not in my same time zone. So we're 2 hours apart.
Yeah.
So I personally have no expectations out of a traditional business day. But also, if you want to work, you can work, which is just, it works for both of us and is very flexible in that way.
I think it's the same way too. I think a lot of independent contractors coming from being employees have that fear of having that really honest and open communication. Because I'm never fearful if you Voxer me at 5 o'clock my time, which is 3 o'clock your time. So you're still working and I'm wrapping up my day. If I Voxer you back and say, absolutely, I'll get back to that tomorrow. I'm cooking dinner. Like that, there's no fear for me to do that with you because we have that honest communication between each other. And also for you to Voxer me and say, hey, if you have a few minutes, I really need you to respond to this email. And I will tell you, yes, I'm getting on it right now, or yes, I can, but it's going to be 45 minutes or when I get off this call or whatever. I think just having that honest and open communication lines between each other is what really makes it work. And I think it's hard for employees coming into the independent contractor role because we're so used to just saying yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's just an implied yes, right? It's not me. So in this situation as an independent contractor, like I'm asking you permission, like versus an employee, you'd be like,
just do this.
Just do it, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm saying that, but I mean, I've never told them to just do this, but it's implied like this is part of your role. Okay. So another thing I wanted to chat about while we're talking about this is like time off. So I have 3 independent contractors in my business and then plus myself. So there's 4 of us. And there's times around the holidays that I'm like, oh,
quiet.
So we're all taking the time off because nobody's asking me for time off. In fact, you just put it on my calendar and then we talk about it the next time we meet. You're like, hey, I put this time on your calendar. I'm not going to be in the office. And Crystal really does the same thing. She's like, and I just want to let you know, Now, I do need to say this with both of you. It is so respectful. Like you guys are telling me a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance, pretty much like, it's like, husband, are we going on a trip? Book the flight. And then it's on my calendar, whenever that is. So it's very respectful. It's not last minute, which works for me. But this is a huge sticking point for someone that's considering, do I want an independent contractor or an employee?
Yes.
Because if it's a position where you don't have a backup or you're not willing to fill in, and that can be an issue.
Absolutely.
Honestly, this could have been an issue if you just traveled all the time and I didn't know that when I hired you.
Right. That might be something that needs to be questioned maybe when you're meeting with potential independent contractors. And independent contractors need to be honest with themselves about that too. Is that important to them to be able to drop everything at the drop of a hat? I can't do that. This is my business. This is what I do full time. I don't have a 9 to 5. A lot of independent contractors will work their 9 to 5 while working their businesses as they're starting to grow. I've been in this long enough that that's not what I do and it's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, I don't have that income coming in if I take off a month, I just up and leave tomorrow for a month and be like, hey, Amber, I'm not going to be here. That's not possible for me because obviously as an independent contractor, I'm not getting paid when I'm not working.
Right.
So that is something that, that's why we do plan in advance and
should be talked about what the expectations are. So you as the business owner hiring the independent contractor, I think it's important to bring up in the interview of, so how often do you vacation? Are they typically a week? Are they longer? How do you handle your position when you are on vacation? Because some people, the independent contractors say, oh, I'll work. I'll just reduce my hours while I'm, on a trip because that's the lifestyle they're choosing. So again, it's just about communicating and then having, the clarity with yourself of like, does that work for me for my business and the support I need?
And I think too, having good SOPs in place, that was something that you had a lot of when I first, started working with you. And then we definitely grew that to, I don't know,
very robust SOPs.
Something SOPs now, but having those SOPs in place so that when an independent contractor does take vacation or does step away from the role for whatever reason, that all of those things are in place so that if you as the business owner do need to take over for a week or for 2 weeks or somebody else in the business needs to take over for that, having those really good SOPs in place so that it's not difficult or it's not as difficult is really, really important. And I think as independent contractors, we need to be remembering to do those as well, be writing those and keeping those steps up to date with what we're doing so that you can say, hey, I'm going to be gone next week, but here's the things that need to get done. And here are the SOPs that coincide with those to make it as easy as we can on the business owner. Because really that's our role. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I think this is important to say, and I'm glad you brought up SOPs because when you hear things like, I can't tell you when you take time off and I can't tell you when to work, that might have been implied of I also can't tell you how I want the role filled. And that's not true. So we have SOPs on how people are responded to, customer support, how to interact with our back office system, how my calendar is handled. All of that's outlined, which is just not even outlined. It's detailed out in SOPs. All of that is to say, well, Lacey, when you work with my company, here's how we operate,
right? Which
is a good guideline for you. Now, I'm speaking to you as my executive assistant, but let's just say that you hire an independent contractor project-based. They are a graphic designer or they're doing your website. I think in those scenarios, there probably won't be an SOP. You're truly hiring them for a delivery of a service or a delivery of a product, like here's your website when I'm done, or here's all your branding when I'm done. And so that independent contractor is for a very, very specific scope and generally not on for long term.
Right.
So what we're talking about today is hiring an independent contractor that is integrated into your business and brought on for a long period of time.
Yeah. And I think, I've done project-based projects with owners in the past. It's not something I do often now, but I think it's still really important to have those super clear, open, and honest communication, even when you're when you're hiring them. What is their time frame? Are they planning on taking any time off during that time frame? What is the delivery estimated time? Just to kind of build that trust, because that's one of the hardest parts of being an independent contractor and a business owner hiring independent contractors, is that trust factor. And so the communication that we've been talking about, the open and honest communication, still stands, whether it's project or long term. Even having SOPs in place, I've seen business owners, hand SOPs over to project-based contractors, even to say, like, this is how my business runs. Not that they're going to step in and really need to know all the details, but just so they know. And it really, as a project-based independent contractor, can really help you understand the business owner better and kind of what they're looking for and what their expectations are, just by being able to read some of those. So just having some in place that are good for them to see, like with your branding guidelines, write out an SOP on what you want that to look like, and how you want things used, or how you want words used, or how you don't want words used. I used to build websites, so having those type of SOPs in place was really helpful for me to look back and go, okay, this is their branding, but this is what they want their business to look like. So they're really huge and can be really helpful.
Excellent. So let's talk about, like, do you call it scope creep? So like if I hired you for X, you're laughing. Okay. So we'll call it scope creep, which is essentially like I hired Lacey for a very specific, like I had a job description. I had a very specific role with specific responsibilities and specific expectations, which we've already talked about. But what happens when that's not clear from the get-go? Or what if it's clear from the get-go and here's what happens. And the business owner is like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to hire a virtual independent contractor. I can get them for 5 hours a week. And then you start working and they're like, haha, just joking. I need you for 25, and just assume you've got an extra, 20 hours a week? How does that work? How do you navigate scope creep or all of that good stuff?
Yeah, that is such a point of contention in the virtual executive assistant world, because it is something that happens all the time. When you're not project-based and you are really integrated into a business, you really, the good ones really do become friends. The people you're working with really become friends. So it does become harder to say no. And that scope creep really jumps in very quickly. So one, I would say, again, like we've talked about, make sure there's a well-defined scope of work before you even start working with an independent contractor. Lay absolutely everything out. This is not the place for other duties as needed. Save that word and that sentence for an employee. That this is not the place for it, because you're limiting an independent contractor to a certain number of hours based on your budget, right? And so as my job as an independent contractor, I need to stay within those defined hours. So I need to know what's important to you as a business owner for me to be working on. This is not the place for a guessing game where I need to figure out what I'm doing. That's going to be a waste of my time and a waste of your time for me being sitting around trying to figure out what I'm doing. So, making sure that the scope of work is very well defined before you ever start working together for the independent contractor and the owner. You need to know what you're asking them to do, and vice versa. So don't do the other duties as assigned. It makes me cringe when I see it on job listings. I'm like, don't do that. Don't say that. It's
like a catch-all.
Yes, like you cannot say that, because I know it seems like, it's going to help me later as an owner to be able to give them more things. It's not. You're wasting valuable time and money because you're paying an hourly contractor to try to spend time figuring out what's priority. That's not a good use of their time. It's not a good use of your money. So don't do that. Plan out what you want them to be working on.
Right. So I guess, knowing what you want, understanding what the position is, and then also like, hey, let's say it's 6 months or a year later, your business has grown, like go back to the table and renegotiate with your independent contractor and say, hey, so the business has grown. I see a bigger need. I'd like to have you work 20 hours, or love to have you work 15 hours. And then the independent contractor can say, yeah, I can do that. Or no, unfortunately, I have other clients. I don't have the capacity. Maybe they just don't want to work that many hours for you.
Right.
But instead of just assuming and scope creep and be like, I'm not going to talk about it. You're not going to talk about it. No one's going to talk about it. Let's just move forward.
Keep giving you more things. No, don't do that. And because there are a lot of other things that the independent contractor can do. They can say, yes, like I try to hold a certain number of hours open each month for my current clients, because the clients that I've been with, I've been really fortunate that I've been with for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you needed something extra this month, like I don't want to say no to you. So I'm going to leave some hours open in case something comes up and you do need me. There's a launch or something else is going on, because I've been with my main clients for a long time. So I want to have that capability to say yes when needed. Some independent contractors cannot do that. They need a certain number of hours to make a certain amount that they need to make in their business, which is fine. But say that you came and she's, you want to grow your business and I want to increase from 15 to 20 hours. Some independent contractors will hire on their own independent contractors to help them with their workload if they want to say yes to that. So that's the other thing, as an owner, you have to know, are you okay with that? With another independent contractor that you did not hire being in on your business, because that is something that they will do. And that needs to be something that's communicated. I have hired my own assistants at times that have never worked in Amber's business, because that's not something
our agreement. Yeah.
That's not our agreement that we have, but I have it with other clients. So, there's just a lot of different things that you can do. You just need to know upfront as a business owner, what are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with an independent contractor that has 6 clients? I would never have that many clients because I am not as productive with that number of clients. So I cap the number of clients that I have. So, as an owner, are you willing to work with an independent contractor who has 6, 10, 12 clients at a time and has other independent contractors working for them? Or would you rather work one-on-one like Amber and I do? It's just
as you were describing that, you're like 6, 12 and other people working. Like, I just wanted to scream no. Like for me, that's like a non-negotiable no. Like that does not work for me.
Yeah, that's fine.
But this is what this conversation is about, is like, you can't, this is true for an employee. It's true for an independent contractor, is that really this is about clarity, taking the time to know what it is you want or don't want.
Right.
And the truth is sometimes you have to do it to figure out what you want or don't want.
Absolutely.
But like, listen to that. Once you know, right? Yeah. You can't foresee every situation. I mean, I've had some doozy independent contractors work for me in the past, right? Like, I've got some good stories.
I know. Unfortunately, we all do. I've had some doozy owners, like,
there you go.
But just don't work well for what I want. But I would have never known had I not done it.
Okay. So let's just talk about that. We are not saying names. We're not doing anything like that. But like, what are some things that are like the do not list? Like what not to do when you work with an independent contractor. So what makes it feel difficult for you to show up your best and do your best job with a business owner?
I think the number one thing I would have to say is micromanaging. I'm a business owner. I consider myself to be a successful business owner. I am very competent. I worked in the nonprofit or corporate world for 15, 16, 17, something like that years before starting my business. So I am very confident in what I'm doing. I have, the social proof, I guess, to back it up. You can call some of my clients and ask them, how do I do? You're not hiring somebody that's never had a job, that doesn't know what they're doing. Like, and my rates show that. I don't ask for $5 an hour. So, when you work with me, you are going to be paying for a professional in the business. I'm not, some 14-year-old looking for my first part-time job. So I think the micromanaging is really hard to combat for me. When I see it starting with an owner, I almost immediately have to say, I'm so sorry, but this is not going to work for me, because it's something that is hard for them to get out of if that's their management style. And so it is something that I ask potential clients now, I've learned, I mean, it can be a hard conversation because sometimes they don't know, but like, are you a micromanager?
Okay, so to that point, someone's listening and they're like, I'm not, or they're like, I am. So what does that look like or feel like for you in your experience? What could that look and feel like for you if you're working with a micromanager?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I try to figure out with an owner is what type of project management are you using? You know, are we using ClickUp? Are you using Asana? Are you using just Google Drive? Whatever it is, that's fine. Like, first of all, you need to know that you never have to add on new systems because a team member likes a system more so than others. Whatever you're doing is fine at the time. Not that you can't grow and change with what your team members need, but as long as you have a system in place, great. For me, that's great. Let's get started there and then we'll figure out where it's going. So I'm assuming as an independent contractor that whatever system you're using is that you are actually using it as a business owner to communicate with your team members. You may not have any other team members at the time. Maybe you and I are, I'm the first one. But I'm assuming that you're putting things in there, that you're not holding them all in your head, and that you are comfortable communicating that way. And so I'm going to work through that, whatever that looks like. I'm going to put our projects there. Anything that I'm working on is going to be there. And I'm going to put notes in there and I'm going to communicate with you about those things through that project management system. So I'm going to assume that you're reading that and that you're coming back to that. And that's what you're using as your hub. So then you come back to me at the end of the day, like, hey, I need to know about this, 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 and this. I'm going to start questioning whether or not you're using the system that you've put in place.
Right. For example, if we're not using a tool to communicate, but rather like I need more FaceTime with you. Like every day we need to talk. At the beginning of the day, we need to talk about what's going to happen. At the end of the day, we're going to talk about what did happen.
Yeah.
That might feel like a mismatch.
That's going to be a mismatch for me because one, like we've talked about, I'm not at my desk from 9 to 5. So my beginning of the day and your beginning of the day are probably different. Same with the end of the days. I'm going to expect that I am not on a face-to-face call with you every single day. Now, there have been teams where I have had a check-in maybe 20 minutes every day. That did not feel like micromanaging necessarily to me because a lot of that was team building because they were large teams. And so we needed to catch up with pieces of projects happening just really quickly. It was not coming and being like, okay, so what are you working on today?
Right.
No. So I try to be very communicative with my owners, with the people that I'm working with, and every, week, Amber and I don't do this because we are very into ClickUp. But with my clients that aren't really into their project management system like that, I'll send a weekly email and say, here's everything that was done this week. Here's some emails that I'm still waiting to hear back from. Here are my top 4 priorities for next week, just so they know, like, here's what's happening in the business and what I'm working on. And then usually we have a weekly meeting as well. But if it starts to get to where every 5 minutes or every couple of hours, you're box ring or sending voice notes or sending an email, hey, where's this? Hey, what's going on with this? Hey, what's going on with this? Either you're not checking your project management system like you need to, or it's not set up the way it needs to be so that you can easily understand what's happening in the business, or you have not kind of garnered that trust with that team member. And that's what that shows me. And sometimes that's okay. That's just showing it's not a good fit. It's not that they're not doing a good job or you're not a good leader in your business. Right. It's just not a great fit. And that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's what you need to hear as the business owner, or experience rather as the business owner, be like, oh, I need an employee that I kind of have from 9 to 5. I can box her, I can call, I can walk, whatever that looks like for you. If that's the way you operate and you're not really ready to change, right? Yeah. Then that's cool. Now you know better.
Absolutely. Now you know. And either you can, if you like that contractor that you're working with, either ask them about being a employee with you, or it's not a great fit and you can look, you can rehire for an employee role. Or, a lot of contractors that have been in the business for a long time, you can talk to them about having a better project management system. Like, what have you seen that works better? Like, I don't understand what's happening in my business, so I'm uncomfortable. What have you seen with other business owners that worked really well? And a lot of independent contractors that have been in this a while can tell you, like, I always go to ClickUp because that's worked really, really well for you and I.
Yeah.
And there are dashboards that you can create so that you can see, an owner can see what's happening. And there's great project management communication in that. And so I've even started in my own business setting up ClickUp for business owners so that they can see like what's happening in their business. Maybe it's not the independent contractor they're struggling with. Maybe it's a system you're struggling with.
That's a really good point. So I want to bring up invoicing or tracking time, right? So I'm going to just say, so with Lacey, you just actually invoice me and charge me at the same time. Like it's total like trusted. I get the invoice the same time it's being processed as a payment. No explainer, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm like, I've never seen it explained. But I will be honest. So with Crystal, she's been with me for, we're going probably on 8 years now. And some time long ago, I had her just track briefly a summary with her hours, but break it up into 2 categories. And so I just want to share why I do it differently with each of you. Okay. So with Lacey, it's like so many different small tasks, like all day, every day. Like it would take longer for her to track her time. There really isn't a reason for it. I can say in my head, I'm like, okay, my business requires X amount of hours for administrative support.
Right.
So, but with Crystal, she's my content manager. And so I have her break up like general marketing, and then I have her pull out all the pieces that do with the podcast. And for me, it's because I actually line item it separately on my P&L so that I know how much my podcast is costing me with support from her, support from my audio editor. I want to know how much my podcast costs each month. And then with regards to the others, it's because like her job is different all the time. Like I have this like random idea and I'm like, hey, Grizzle, can you do this? Can you do that? Well, I don't always know what I'm asking for. So for me, it's feedback. And I'm just like, oh, yeah. Okay. So next time I'll know that simple request was 4 hours. But like, so for me, I'm just using it as feedback. Like I trust Crystal explicitly. I've never questioned an invoice. Like I can't think of a time I've ever questioned an invoice. That's why I ask her to do that.
Right.
And that's also why I don't ask you to do that. But that can fall under micromanaging. Like if I was asking you to account for every minute of the time that you're with me, or, say you bill me for 10 and I'm like, oh, I haven't talked to her that much this week. Like it had to have been 5. Like, who am I to know what you're doing behind the scenes? Like I should be busy doing my business and not micromanaging your hours, but rather have trust that I have people on my team that I can fully trust that are not taking advantage of me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I've had clients in the past like come up with, oh gosh, everything that you can think of. But like, I've had one in the past say like, I want you writing down every minute of what you're doing. One, let me just tell you, as an independent contractor, I roll my eyes at that because I'm like, you understand that that's probably another at least hour that I'm wasting, that you're paying me, that I'm wasting time just writing down in a spreadsheet what I'm doing every minute. That is time that I'm wasting not working on your business and the tasks that need to be done. Now, there is time for that. Like Amber said, sometimes you need to know how much a project is costing. And I definitely understand that. I have some clients where we're like, hey, we need to write this new newsletter, but I don't know how much it's going to cost and if that cost is worth it. So can you track your time doing the newsletter so that we can see, is it taking up 10 hours or 3 hours?
Right. What is the return on investment?
Yeah. Is it worth it? Absolutely. So as an independent contractor, I completely understand those things. Completely makes sense. But when you're like, hey, I want you tracking every minute and everything that you're doing every minute, as for the role that I play as an executive assistant or an online business manager, I'm switching gears very quickly. Like it could be I'm cleaning out your inbox 1 minute and the next minute I'm looking at your calendar because of something that came up in your inbox. And then I've switched to your calendar and now I'm switching to responding to clients in the client care email. because of something else that came up in your email, switching to client care email. So
right.
my job switches very, very quickly. So it could be a minute here, 3 minutes there. It's not that I'm wasting time or not spending my time being productive. It's that the things that I'm doing are lending itself to other things in the business that all are connected. So trying to track that every minute is so, so hard. And it's such a time suck that, for those clients, I want to be like, if you don't trust me in this role, then maybe we aren't a great fit.
Right. I mean,
track that.
This is coming from someone that, I'm a huge proponent of time tracking, especially, for the business owner, right? Like I would say, how much time did you track just in your inbox, right? Like, I'm not going to say like, oh, I handled this or I was in this inbox. Like, there's power to having this data. But also when you're tracking your time as a business owner, it should look very different than your EA's time. Meaning, just like what Lacey said, Lacey's job is to be professional at jumping from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Like that is the best use of her time so that you, the business owner, can go dive into these bigger projects, that focused work. Like that's what in this scenario, that's what her job is to take that away. And so when we ask you to track your time, it should be like, I spent 30 minutes on this, an hour on this. So in any case, what we're talking about is there is definitely a time and place for tracking time. But if you're using it to micromanage or you're using it to kind of, what's the word? Like control your trust issues.
Right. Yes.
Maybe that's not the right word. But if you're having some major trust issues, Lacey and I have talked about this in the past, is like the time tracking is not going to fix that. There's some other unsaid thing. There's something else that's not working. And so it's really worth getting to the root of that. Whether it is truly you personally don't trust anyone, even if they're trustworthy, or is it your gut telling you this person is not trustworthy? And so deal with that, not let's track time. Deal with why you're not trusting the person.
Absolutely. And I think too, as an independent contractor, I want to know up front what's going to build that trust the fastest. So as an owner, I expect you, and I ask this question to the potential clients that I meet with, but as an owner, I would love to know, and so you need to think about this before you hire, what will build that trust the quickest? Are you a face-to-face person? Do we need to have some Zoom calls, maybe just in the first 2 weeks, every other day, so that we can chat face-to-face? Are you just a voice person? Amber and I, we Voxered so much in the beginning of working together because Amber likes to talk things out, but she knew that about herself ahead of time and told me that so that I know what to expect and how to respond to her so that that trust is built faster. Or are you a person that's just like, let me just give you all this mess and you just figure it out and come back to me with a plan? And that's great too. But as an independent contractor, I have no way of knowing that unless you know that about yourself and can tell me that up front.
Yeah.
Because I'm willing to do whatever you want to do and makes you most comfortable to build that trust with me quickly. Because your business is your baby, and I get that. My business is my baby. I totally understand that. So let's just be self-aware and say, I like to see you face to face because that makes me trust you more. That's fine. I just need to know that so that I'm not emailing you in, 14 emails of what's happening. I'm just going to schedule a meeting with you instead.
Right.
So, but I don't know that unless you know that and can tell me that.
Yeah. For me, so I call it the trust tank, right? Like our love tank is empty. Like my pups wake up, they need all the attention and love, right? The cuddles, because I'm like, oh, your love tank emptied last night. Yes. Well, the same thing is for like your trust tank is that, what is it going to take to get full? And then also whatever that is, face to face, talking it out, but also what do you need to keep topping it off? Meaning, can you, the business owner, keep looking for positive proof of like, oh, they're doing good, they're doing good? Because if you're not looking for the good, you're only going to see the bad if there's a mistake, not if, when there's a mistake.
When there's a mistake, absolutely.
Like we're human. And so understanding how does that affect your trust tank, right? Well, for me, I'm like, I can have tons of grace because I've seen 100 good things because I'm choosing to look at that. And of course, there's a mistake and it's not the end of the world. And actually, in that point doesn't affect the trust tank.
Right.
So What does that look like? It's about, seeing, are they hitting deadlines? It's communicating in a way that you feel like you're clear and they picked it up clearly and did what you need them to do. All of that is filling up that trust tank.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to do that and to be self-aware of knowing what is that going to look like for you? Like as the owner, what are those kind of aha moments of they're doing a really good job? Even if you have to set those expectations up front of in 3 months, if we have gotten to X place, then I'm going to feel like we're in a good place working together. Or in 12 months, if I am able to spend 2 days working in my business and not, on my business and not in my business, then I know we've been successful working together. That's great. Like see what those moments are going to be for you and kind of setting those expectations in your mind and with your team members. It's so, so helpful.
I remember thinking how long it would take for me to feel like you've got this. I can let off the, like you said, I was conversating a lot. I was probably watching what you're doing way more than I do now. Like I don't, right? But when you're onboarding somebody, training somebody, and you guys are getting into a rhythm, it's been years now. So let's just say I thought it was a month. I remember being so inappropriate and we were on a call and I was like, so the leash is off. I'm like, okay, that was so inappropriate. And all I meant was like, and it was like way early. I think it was like our second meeting where I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl has like blown me away. Like I don't need to look. And here's the tip for the business owner. If you are micromanaging, you almost certainly should probably just be doing it yourself, right? Like, because you're spending so much time, bandwidth, energy looking and micromanaging, the biggest gift someone can give you, employee or contractor, is that reclaimed bandwidth of I trust them, they're doing their job, and I don't need to look anymore. I'm sorry, let me take that back. You always need to look. It's your business. It's your responsibility.
Sure.
But it's not the same as when you're onboarding somebody. It's not the same as when you're figuring out, are they a fit? Can you trust them? And so once you've turned that corner, like that's the gift in hiring somebody.
Absolutely. And like, I get it all the time because people think that they're micromanaging when they're asking a question. As a business owner, never apologize for asking questions. Like, if you come back to me and say, did this email get handled? Don't apologize for asking me that. Like, I'm going to give you the answer because that's my job. Like, I am not offended that you have asked me where we are on a project or what's happening. So stop apologizing for asking what's going on in your business. That is not offensive as an independent contractor. We understand that you need to know. But if you're coming back to me every day asking what's happening in your business, then that shows me that there are some missteps somewhere else. Either it's in our communication or it's in systems. Either one can be fixed, either with a new hire or a new system or a change in system. That is fine, but don't apologize for asking questions. Like, go back, ask questions. Onboarding takes time. We understand that as independent contractors. That trust takes time. Amber and I just happen to find that very quickly, and you will find that with some contractors that you work with, and maybe not so much with others. Doesn't mean they're a bad fit. Just, it's just life. We're people, humans, just the connection is there, or sometimes it's not. But don't apologize for asking questions. Ask questions, especially when you're onboarding. It helps us know where those things are, where those pieces are missing.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. So my head said, okay, if you said your number one issue with, a mismatch is micromanaging, is the extreme true? The other extreme of like, they are just like not in their business, MIA, like, hey, Lacey, peace, just take care of it and I'll talk to you in a month. Like, I think you've seen that happen too.
I have seen that happen. It does not happen nearly as often, but I have seen it happen. And I will say, I probably jump out just as quickly from those clients as I do with the micromanaging clients, because if you're not sold on your business, I cannot make you successful. If you're not 100% into what you're doing. Now, I've worked with clients who have multiple businesses, and so it is harder for them to be in one business fully or be fully sold into that. And they want me to take over a big chunk of that business. that's fine. I welcome that as long as that was well defined when we started working together of like, you're here and you're working on to grow this business, but you also have this other business over here. That's fine. Just tell me that up front. Don't hide from me that the fact that you have another business and you're not going to be 100% in this one. Like,
right.
And then tell me after we've started working together, because I need to know that expectation up front because my job is going to look different.
Right.
For sure.
Well, I mean, I'm sure like in your scenario, it sounds like the person had multiple businesses, but there's also a scenario in which someone says, okay, great, I hired an independent contractor and kind of wipes their hand. And maybe they're fully in their business, but they're not seeing you as a part of the team. Right. And I think that it's important, you know, for me, in my opinion, is that unless it's like a one-time, very specific reason you're hiring an independent contractor, I've had plenty, right? We've talked project-based websites, all the things. But if you're hiring an independent contractor that's on, you know, permanently until not, right, for a long period of time, I think it's important to make sure that they're integrated into the business and the team, not that you're left on the outside. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, you know, when you have, you know, I've seen teams and I've been on teams that are very separated in what they're doing. They don't come together ever for team meetings. Now, I'm not saying you need to have a team meeting every day or even every week. Like it's up to you on how you want to build that out. But the teams that I've seen be most successful are the team leaders and the owners that are integrating their teams together. Like I am an independent contractor and you do understand that, but I know because of what you tell me, what Crystal's working on. Crystal and I have met together. We know each other. We know what we do in the business.
And likewise with Sabrina, you chat with Sabrina
right?
And whenever there's an opportunity that any of you have to collaborate, you guys do that.
We do that. Like I'm totally comfortable, even though we don't meet as a team on a regular basis, I'm totally comfortable reaching out to Sabrina through our project management system and saying, hey, I have this issue. Can you help me do this? Like I know when there's a launch or something because I know when she's going to be super busy and I don't need to reach out to her right now because she's got something else going on. So there are ways to make both sides work where you're meeting together as teams all the time, where you're not. But Amber always does a really good job. You always do a really good job of making sure I know what's happening, like in the business of, you know, we're going to try out this new thing and I'm going to be using Crystal a lot for this. So I know as an independent contractor, I'm not going to reach out to Crystal a lot right now. I'm not going to ask her right now because she and Amber are working on this. It's not that I'm a part of it or even need to know what's happening, but you still kind of keep me up to date on where you are. Where is your mind? Because too, I need to know mentally, where are you right now? Can I bring you some thoughts and some ideas, or are you working on something and now's not a great time for that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in my business, I meet with everybody on the team on a regular basis, one-on-one. Yeah. And so it's really common for me to say, hey, so I'm going to be working with Crystal on this thing. And then when we get it to a certain point, just expect it's going to be passed over to you. Here's the deadline, right? Yeah. Like that happens quite a bit because I play the project manager in my business just because it's a natural skill set. I'm sure in other clients, you probably play the role of project manager very much. And again, see, that was also something that I'm sure we talked about early on. Like if you were like, no, I'm either, playing the role of project manager, I'm not playing in the sandbox at all. Like we should have had that conversation because for me, it doesn't take a lot of bandwidth. And because it's a natural skill set for me and that's where I'm comfortable right now. I'm not saying I'll be there forever, but right now I play project manager, which means I'm communicating the pieces of any given project to everybody on the team. Yeah. I don't know how we got on that subject, but because I have those conversations to say, hey, Crystal and I are working on this or Crystal's working on this, and then it's going to go to you, where I'm kind of managing expectations and resources, time resources around a particular project.
Right. But I think like you knew that up front that you have that skill set. As a business owner, again, this goes back to you being honest with yourself. If you don't have that skill set, don't try to do that. Like, don't. Yeah,
I agree.
And that's okay. I do have that skill set and that is in my bandwidth that I do with most of my clients, not so much Amber anymore, but I have in the past. It just depends on
what it is.
Yeah, like where we are. But with, some of my clients, they don't have the bandwidth or the mental capacity or the skill set to be able to be the project manager for their team. And that's okay. But I know that going in. Like,
and I got to say, like, in all transparency, like I'm sharing, I do that, but like in 10 years, no client has ever played the role of project manager that I've ever worked with, ever. So that's a lot of clients.
Yep.
I don't think you should. Like, honestly, I would say it's like probably 1% where and that's why I do what I do in my business. Like, it's because that does come super naturally to me. But if it didn't, like I'm with Lacey, 100% should not be on, like it is not the best use of your time. You have so much more value you can bring to the business. I'm 100% with that.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't try to do it because it's going to be miserable for me and your team members, honestly. Like for you trying to do something that's not a skill set of yours, then just don't do it. And I always tell people like, when you're starting a business, it's going to show you your weaknesses so much more than you ever wanted to know.
Yeah, you're so right.
As a business owner, like it has happened for me in my business. It still happens, even though several years in, I'm still learning a lot about myself. And as a business owner, you've just got to kind of fall into that and let it happen. Like, let it show you those things, those places where you're weak, even if you're like, no, but I want to be a good project manager. Okay, great. Then go and learn that, but don't learn it on your team. Like, don't sacrifice your team members and their mental capacity for you not being strong in something. Let them be strong in what they're strong in. And if you're going to hire an online business manager, for example, let them be your project manager. That should be their number one skill set. Let them do that and learn from them, and then go learn how you want to learn how to be a better, project manager or whatever that looks like for you. Amber already has that skill, obviously, as the productivity specialist. That is her that's her main skill.
I can't turn it off. It's how I see the world. Before ClickUp, I only saw the world in spreadsheets.
Exactly. And that's okay. It's your strength. Use it, and you use it well, for our team. And I don't feel the need to jump into that. But if you don't have that skill, don't do that. Don't try to be that project manager over your team, because it's going to wear them out, and it's going to wear you out in the process. And there's just no reason for that.
Yeah, it's just not the best use of your time or energy. So as we wrap up today, do you have any like parting words of wisdom for business owners that are like, am I ready for an independent contractor, or do I need an independent contractor versus employee? Our goal of today's episode was to just pull back the curtains on what that relationship looks like so that each business owner can make the best decision for themselves. So any parting words, advice, wisdom for the business owners that are listening out there that either are going to embark on an independent contractor or want to make their current independent contractor relationships better?
Absolutely. So, and Amber didn't tell me to say this, so I promise you. We're in this together, but because I've worked on this with her, Amber has a great hiring toolkit.
I had no idea what you were going to say. Okay, go ahead and say it.
Use it. Use the hiring toolkit. Just work with people who have hired and managed teams before. If this is your first independent contractor, if this is your very first hire, using people like Amber who can coach you through the process, and using her hiring toolkit to really know the questions that you need to be asking and the conversations that you need to be having before you even go into hiring somebody is so important. Know what you want, know what your strengths are and what they're not, and exactly what you're wanting this person to do. Because if you go in thinking they're going to save my business because they're a social media manager that's going to grow my business 100 times over, you are going to be so disappointed. You need to know, like, I need this person to write X number of social media posts a week, create X number of graphics, because it's going to do X in my business. That's what you need to kind of go in with, is some really clear expectations and clear boundaries on what you want this person to do, because it's going to make them successful, and it's going to set the expectation in your mind of exactly, if they're not reaching these milestones, then we need to look at what's not working. Is it them? Is it me as a project manager to them? Am I not being clear? Or is it systems in my business? There's just a lot of different things that can be sort of messed up in the process. And you want to make sure that it's not you. You know, you want to make sure that it's not something that you're doing. So just know what you want in that role. What are the milestones for that role? What are the things that you're good at and the things that you're not good at that you're going to want to hand off? And I think if you have those things set in place before you start hiring on your team, then it's going to be great. May not be great every time, but you know,
that's right.
You're on a really good path for sure.
I think so too. You're preparing for the opportunity for it to be great more often than not, because we can all do hires, either employee or contractor, where you're like, is the same person I interviewed the same person in my business right now? Like, it happens. But we really want to pull out all of those, as many of those variables as possible by, like what you said, Lacey, we focus on getting clear before you're ever posting for the job or looking for somebody, so that you can have clear expectations and conversations in the hiring process.
Yep.
I think this is great. One, my call to action for everybody here today is whether you're looking at bringing somebody on, and we talked about all the do's and don'ts, or you currently have an independent contractor and you want to do a reset. I think you could use everything we talked about here today, get clear before that conversation, have a clear conversation about expectations. And the independent contractor can say, yeah, that sounds great, we can move forward, or no, like, it is time to part ways. But don't avoid that conversation if you're currently in a relationship that's not working for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many resources out there for sure.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lacey, for having this conversation with me.
Absolutely.
And I know it's been so much value. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Lacey as much as I enjoyed having it and bringing it to you. Lacey, I forgot to ask Lacey how you could best reach out to her and work with her if you choose to. So, if you are looking for a mentor for your virtual assistant to help you both work to your full potential, or you need help setting up your ClickUp so that your team has clear project management systems, she is available to support you with both of those offerings. And to learn more about ways to work with her, you can head on over to Lacey and Co. So Lacey, ANDCO.online/store. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk, and I sure hope you found today's episode to be incredibly insightful and valuable. And at the very least, my goal was to help you come to clarity so that you can make the best decision for your business and building your team. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So in today's episode, a great actionable, if you already have independent contractors and that relationship is not solid, then get clear about what it is you need and have a clear conversation about what it is that you need so that you guys can get on the same page. If you do not yet work with an independent contractor, then let the clarity that you've received from today's episode help guide you into moving forward and through your hiring process, that you truly understand that this can be supported by an independent contractor, or this role needs to be supported by an employee. That's my straight talk for you today. Until next time, have a productive week.